Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Mr. Adrian Smith, introduce himself to our listeners and viewers at home.
G'day, my name's Adrian and I'm from Hamilton and all the way down in New Zealand, and it's a pleasure to be here with you guys today.
Absolutely. So what's since we have only interviewed one other person from New Zealand, what's one cool fact about your abode, where you live?
Okay. Probably the coolest thing is I live about a 30-minute drive from the Hobbiton movie set. So that's where they filmed all the scenes in and around Hobbiton in the Shire. And after they made the Hobbit films, they left the set as it is, as you see it in the movie. And you can now visit that set. It's like a big tourist attraction. And if I remember correctly, they have now built the interior to Bilbo's and Frodo's house, so you can actually go into Bag End and look around like it's like a real Hobbit house.
Nice.
So, yeah, that's pretty cool.
So when they filmed the inside for the movie, it was probably in a set. It wasn't actually inside the building.
Correct. Yeah, no, they did that down in Miramar Studios in Wellington. So all the interiors were done in Wellington. Yeah. So this is just where they did the exterior stuff.
Okay. Learn something new every day. Beautiful country that. So do you go up there and visit?
Yeah, I've been there a few times. The mountain range you see behind the Shire is called the Kaimai Ranges, and I hike a lot up there. There's some really beautiful spots up there. So yeah, quite often.
Yeah, you were New Zealand is unique, which is why so many movies are filmed there. In that you have, I think, of all the different types of geographical features, you have all of them on your island.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of islands, yeah, but yeah, we got everything from desert to mountains to geothermal areas. It's kind of like it's all compressed into like one little country.
Absolutely. All right. So the next part of the introduction, dear listeners, how we first found them. So this is one of the guests that we got from Josh Hayes, friend of the show. And he works for Atheon, as he's mentioned, and Adrian is published with them for the series we're talking about. So he said, hey, he's got a new book out. You guys should talk. So we set it up, and here we are. It was a little bit of finagling to make it happen because time zones are a thing. And when you live halfway across the world, sometimes it gets confusing. So we're recording this on a Friday, my time, but it's like Saturday morning for him.
Yeah. Saturday afternoon, 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Oh, even worse.
Not so good.
So it made it convenient for us to figure this out. But with that said, before we get started, we have to ask you the religion questions. Are you ready for this, sir?
Yes.
All right. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Star Wars, easily.
Oh, why is that?
Love it. I remember going to it when I was a very young child, maybe about 5 years old, and just fell in love with it straight away. Yeah.
Okay.
Lightsabers, the Millennium Falcon, R2-D2. Wow.
Yeah, I always like the Millennium Falcon. There's something about a ship that looks like a junk, but it's like, they got the super engine underneath. And for everyone who's never had a lot of money and drove a crap car, you like to pretend that underneath the hood, your car is badass too. So
for sure.
It speaks to you,
Yeah, it was just something about that spaceship. It just resonated with you straight away. You either get it or you don't.
And there's been a whole host of sci-fi properties since then have done that trope with the trash can spaceship that's really like badass underneath. Like there's something about it that resonates. I'm not enough of a sci-fi historian to know if that was the first time you've seen that trope used or not, but I dig it whenever I see it.
Yeah. Because it always looks so sleek, didn't it? Like, 2001? That came out a few years before, 10 years before, whenever it was. And everything looked so clean and sharp. And what I liked about Star Wars was everything was kind of junky, It was old. Everything was old and used. Yeah.
The cool thing is if you look at any of the behind the scenes about how some of the shapes were made for the various StarCraft, and it was just like, oh, I've got a sandwich in hand, a sandwich that someone's got an olive through. And why you stick an olive in a sandwich, I don't know. I'm not fancy enough. And someone had taken a bite and he goes, oh, that's a spaceship. And that's kind of the story of the Millennium Falcon.
Well, they were doing it on a budget, weren't they? So
that's just the inspiration. Like when the artists were doing the storyboarding. Yeah. That was kind of the inspiration. And then they would like just put random items together and be like, oh, that'll work.
That'll work. I like the story. I think it was Empire Strikes Back when they needed some suits for the bounty hunters, and they just borrowed one from the Doctor Who series and used it for what's his name, Bessick, I think, the one that looks like kind of like a lizard. That orange suit he's wearing is actually from a Doctor Who episode.
Really?
And they just borrowed it for the day because they didn't have enough costumes to go around.
I mean, that's kind of cool. I like when you see that kind of stuff, and you can be like some of the original Star Trek, where they would like land on a Wild West planet, and it's like, they went over to Studio C, and it's a Wild West set. They just had to borrow.
Yeah, exactly.
So, because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia?
Ooh, that's actually quite tough. Because I grew up reading Chronicles of Narnia, I loved it, but I think overall I'd have to go with Game of Thrones. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing we learned in our lifetime, Adrian, is that while all fantasy planets look like New Zealand, all fantasy lands look like New Zealand, every sci-fi alien planet looks like Canada.
Thanks, Stargate.
Yeah. They're not the only ones that's filmed there, so that's why the joke came from. And that wasn't even the girl that played Sam Carter, Amanda Tapping. She threw that in as a joke, and they were supposed to cut it, and they just left it.
Oh, really? I must have missed that in an episode.
I've watched so many of where they go to cons and they film the panels where they were talking about Stargate. Like, if it's on YouTube, I've probably watched that panel.
Cool.
So I mean, that's just the one one property I fanboy about.
Yeah.
All right, so if you could write for any IP that you're a fan of, if they asked you, hey, will you write an X, something that would make you stop everything to write for, what property would that be for you?
Oh, man, you asked some tough questions. Ooh, probably like a Lord of the Rings kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Walking Dead or something like that, or Mad Max. Oh, I'd love to write in a Mad Max. In the Mad Max universe, that would be pretty cool.
For me, it would be probably Stargate, Fallout, the IP, the game, just because it's so awesome, or Primeval. Are you familiar with that one?
Which was called Primeval.
Primeval, and then they did the Canadian version, Primeval New World. Basically, the long and the short of it is there are time anomalies, and that's where you get all the cryptids. They're actually ancient creatures walking through time anomalies.
Yes, I have seen that. Was it a British program first, or am I thinking?
It was a British program first. Then they
did.
They lost the rights because the company making it went bankrupt. It was actually canceled in spite of high numbers because the episodes were so expensive to produce, and the company went under. Which is why they only got 4 or 5 seasons in the first run, and then the Canadian Broadcasting picked up the New World Series, and they did 3 or 4. But again, it was just because of when it was filmed, it was so expensive that they just despite it being wildly popular when it aired for what it was, it just couldn't offset.
It was just economic reasons more than lack of fans.
That's one of the things that I wish they might revisit, because nowadays with modern technology, I have to imagine it's not as expensive to do that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah, especially with that new filming technique like the Star Wars TV shows use, the big screen behind them, what is it, like a 180 or something?
Yeah.
And
unfortunately, though, with the way Hollywood's going and whatever the global version of that is, I'm not sure they would get it right, because they forgot at some point in time that they were to entertain and not to, wax poetic about philosophy or politics or insert whatever the message of the day is. Can we just turn it all off and have fun again?
Yeah, I wish they would.
So on the one hand, I'd love to see them bring that property back, and on the other, I'm like, yeah, but they'd probably mess it up.
Yeah.
So, Speaking of dinosaurs, this is a heck of a segue. I could have tried this one better if I done this one better if I tried. One of the shames of adulthood is that people after a certain age stop asking you what your favorite dinosaur is. So I will ask you, sir, what's your favorite dinosaur?
I would have to say a Stegosaurus.
Mine too. Excellent answer.
And mainly because they look so bizarre and wacky, and I love any animal that is bizarre and wacky looking. I don't know. There's something about strange-looking animals that.
Do you guys have any strange animals there in New Zealand?
Oh yeah, we got plenty. We got plenty. It's like we're having a competition with Madagascar and Australia, who has the strangest animals. So, ours are mainly flightless birds. So, we have a flightless parrot called a kakapo. Yeah, and they or we call them moss chickens. They they live in the forest and they don't fly, and so they're very susceptible to predators, unfortunately. Kiwis, I'm sure everyone knows what a kiwi is. So.
Right.
Yeah, those are probably. We've got very small dolphins called a Hector's dolphin. What else? Kias. They're a mountain parrot. They live up in the mountains, and they like to destroy things. So, like in America, if you go hiking, you got to be, and you're camping, you got to be wary of bears. But in New Zealand, you got to be wary of Kias because they rip things apart. So, destroy all your
I'm going to throw a link. I found a link from the Department of Conservation, which is a New Zealand government website.
Yeah.
And they've got a list of all their animals because, part of your guys' national industry is, of course, tourism.
Yeah.
And so they are helpful in having all that information on hand. So if you were curious, dear listener, about what some of these look like, I'm throwing the link from his government's website and you can go check it out.
Yeah.
And they specify or they separate it by what type of animals they are. So you can go from there. Now, compared to Australia, which everyone's familiar with, are yours as dangerous as their animals or more end user friendly, I guess?
Yeah, user friendly. Ours aren't. We only have one poisonous spider in New Zealand, and it was not that bad. So it's not like Australia. No.
Okay.
We don't have 9 of the 10 most deadly snakes here for a start. So. No,
yes, the joke about Australia is everything there wants to kill you, even the ones that you can't. They just, they want to though.
It's just an old wives' tale.
I don't know. I've never been, and maybe someday.
No, it's a cool place. Like I lived there, and I very rarely saw anything deadly. Seriously, couple of brown snakes, but nothing that bad.
My rule of thumb is there's so much of my own country because it's so big I haven't seen that before I go abroad. I want to travel the States. Like if I ever strike it big, like I'm buying an RV and I'm just driving to all the places. Hopefully, guys go down first.
Go to all 50 states.
All right, so because we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blaze podcast, we are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. Coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Oh, I drink tea and varieties: black with milk, green tea, rooibos with chai, different herb teas. Yeah, just a big tea drinker. Full stop.
Okay. Do you ever talk to your tea maker or your electric kettle or whatever you're doing and be like, Earl Grey, hot, just because,
You wish it was that thing on Star Trek. What's it called? Like the thing that.
Yeah.
Whatever it's called.
They actually sell cups that when they're cold, you see, like when they're empty or cold, you see the original TOS Star Trek away team, and then as you pour the hot liquid into it, it fades like they're getting like transported.
Those cups are cool.
Yeah.
I've got one that's got lightsabers on it, so it lights all the lightsabers as it gets hotter.
Yeah, I've got one of those. The problem is you have to hand wash them because you throw them through a dishwasher, you're going to ruin whatever makes them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But, okay. With that out of the way, so where did you first start with your love of speculative fiction? Because you didn't just start out one day and say, I'm going to write it. You started somewhere.
Yeah. Probably so growing up, we didn't have a television. My mum was really against it, and she just encouraged me to read right from day one. So my reading age was a lot higher than my school classmates. I was reading books like The Hobbit, the Shannara series, Frederick Forsyth books when I was 10, 11 years old, 12 years old. And I pretty much read out all my library. And it was probably around the age of 14 or 15 that I seriously started thinking about writing my own books. But, life kind of gets in the way sometimes. And the first thing I actually thought of was I want to be a script writer, because I was lucky enough to come of age during the 1980s. So we had all those wonderful 80s movies, to watch. And I just was like, I'm going to be a script writer. And I went off and did my trade. So I became a painter and decorator and worked on different scripts, but they never really came to anything, as it never does. And then I went traveling. And what year was it? 2015, I think it was. I read a book called The Purge of Babylon by an author called Sam Sisyphath. And then that led me to the Extinction Cycle series by Nicholas Sainsbury Smith. And I started emailing Nick, and we became really good friends. And he was one of the people to really encourage me to write. And the first book I wrote was called The Rule of Three, and that's set in his universe, his Extinction Cycle universe. And yeah, so that's how I got my start. But yeah, probably since I was about 13 or 14, that's when I really fell in love with all sorts of speculative fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, detective, thrillers. I pretty much read anything except romance. Ugh, who wants to read that stuff? But yeah.
At one point in time, I read that because I thought it would help me understand women, and plot twist, it does not. You end up more confused.
Exactly.
So you pretty much started wanting to be a writer from the beginning. What made you decide, like obviously reading Nick Smith's stuff was kind of the impetus to do it, but was that already in the back of your head, or did it literally just after you read his be like, I really want to do this?
Yeah, it's always been there, but I never knew when to start or how to start. I didn't have that higher education. Like I never went to university. I went to technical college, so I went to trade school. And so I kind of didn't have that understanding of how to structure a book. Even though I'd read a lot, it's like, where do you start? How do you turn your idea that you have into an actual story, a cohesive story that people are understand and be entertained by? And it was, and then one day I just kind of decided I've got to try. If I never try, I'll never do it. So, it was reading his books and talking to Nick and to another couple of good friends that gave me the kick up the butt to try it at least. And then I sort of stumbled along until I managed to write a book, and went from there.
So is there a big like author community in New Zealand that you can bounce ideas off of? Those are generally very helpful for new authors.
Oh yeah, there is. There's a number of groups. There's an author here called Lee Murray, who horror fans would know. She's won quite a lot of Bram Stoker awards for her works. She's amazing. She is always supportive, and you can message her, and she will give you feedback. And through her, she's got a big community of horror and sci-fi authors that, again, you can message and bounce ideas off, or say, I'm struggling with this dialogue, how can I fix it? And people will critique you. There's I'm not sure if it's every 2 years or every 3 years now because of COVID, but there's a big like a book convention that we have, and they so you get to meet everyone and go on panels. I've been on a few panels and talk, and you can go and learn about marketing and learn about dialogue, anything you need to learn. There's heaps of workshops you can do. So yeah, there's plenty of groups you can join.
I know from a national level, the New Zealand and Australia does it too. They're very supportive of their people that are going into the arts, because it's that the local boy made it big syndrome. And given how much of the market share the U.S. has, whenever someone from somewhere else is doing good, it's like everyone was like, "Yeah, that's art," which I think that's healthy. So I got nothing against it.
Yeah,
and it is interesting when you see books written by people that live different places, because I do think like what you consider normal is affected by where you live and the culture and all that. So I can see how that flavors your stories too.
Oh yeah, you have a different perspective of looking at things, because one, your culture is different, isn't it? Even though we're Western culture, we all speak English. Our accents are different. We have a different outlook on things because of how we've been brought up and all that kind of stuff.
So when you do your writing, because obviously European English tends to add U's that the American version doesn't have. When you write, do you write it the American version, or do you leave the local flavor of the spelling?
Yeah. So I write in UK English. So we put the U like in color,
right?
Things like that. Yeah. But there's also other little bits like in America, you guys say leaned, Leaned, and we say lent. We put a T on the end. Yeah. So I do generally use UK spelling and idioms, but sometimes I'm like in this later series, it's got a bit of a mixture because of where it's set. It's a bit of a melting pot of our sort of cultures, so there's a bit of a mixture in there.
Has your publisher Athon been supportive of letting that stay? Because some publishers are like, no, we've got to convert it to English, American English.
Yeah, no, they were fine with it. So
nice.
Yeah. I think most people kind of realize that there's different ways of spelling, and I think it's the same way.
For a while, the indie side specifically, and then small press, it was very much we've got to write it the American way. And then people realized, if we let them do their own thing, we could get some super cool stories if they're not all trying to recycle the same thing. And so you've started to see more, I think, of that natural flavor. You're starting to see like fantasy, for instance, it's not proto-Europe. They're like, Asian or anywhere else but, which I think has been interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So was there anything you think as a creator that has been the defining moment that shapes the way you tell stories?
Like influences, you mean?
Life event that happens that affects you, story you read that inspired you. Is there any one thing you think that has kind of altered the way you tell stories?
Yeah, there's been a few things. I read a book called The Chrysalids by John Wyndham, who was an English sci-fi author back in the 50s and 60s. The Day of the Triffids is probably his most well-known work. That was a big influence on me because of it should have showed a post-apocalypse world where like religion had sort of like fundamentalist religion had kind of taken over. Kind of like The Handmaid's Tale, but this was written a long time before then. There's been so many movies over the years. But probably The Goonies was one of my biggest influences. Just the way the story's being told. I love that sense of adventure. That they've got to go off and find treasure. And those Indiana Jones movies were the same. The early ones, not the later ones. And then, like I mentioned earlier, like reading The Purge of Babylon by Sam Sisofath and Nick Smith's books, they were like really big influences on me and how I wanted to tell a story. And the latest one is probably the sitcom The Good Place. I really love the moral of that story about growing to be a better person and like really challenging yourself to become better. And so I try and add a little bit of philosophy into my books and really put a message in there, like weave a message in between, and like, you know, what gives the characters the basis of doing the things and the reasons why they do what they want to do and what they want to achieve. And so yeah.
Now, if I go to your website,
Yeah.
And your website is the Noise Shouter. So we talked about this in the pre-show. Can you tell people that are curious why that is your website domain name?
Okay, in New Zealand we have a penguin, and it's called a hoiho, which is in the Māori te reo language, and the English translation of hoiho is noise shouter. And if you ever come across those penguins and heard them, you would understand why. They're extremely loud and they make a lot of noise. And I just thought it fitting. And when I was writing my latest series, one of the characters has taken a few too many knocks to the head, and she calls anyone that's noisy noise shouters. So when I was coming up with my domain name, it kind of just resonated and stuck. So that's what I used.
That's cool. So you wrote, when I look at your website, I notice a lot of your books seem to be post-apoc as the genre you prefer. So what is it about the post-apoc genre that appeals to you?
I really like exploring how people react to extreme situations. For instance, in my Extinction New Zealand series, it's the story of Jack and Dee, who are just everyday people, and they get caught up in this absolutely insane thing that happens. Like this virus gets released and turns people into monsters. And I really wanted to explore how everyday people with any form of military training or any kind of physical martial arts training or anything like that, how they would react to that kind of situation and the things they were willing to do in order to survive and to find their loved ones. So that's what always attracts me to it, is exploring different situations. And when you dream up all these crazy post-apocalyptic situations, that's the reasons why I like exploring what would happen to different kind of sets of people. Like in my Nameless series, the main character is basically a spy, like a CIA agent, but he's not. He's like works for an agency, so it's like he's kind of more well versed to survive something like that. But then, what does he do? How does he do it? And that's what attracts me to it.
Were you like a Boy Scout or something growing up?
Yeah, I was. Yes, definitely in the Scouts. We have Cubs here as well in New Zealand, so you become a Cub first.
Yeah, we have that too.
Oh, yeah, okay. And then Boy Scouts, and I love all the outdoor type stuff, mainly hiking. Yeah, camping, hiking.
Absolutely, something about the serenity of nature that just soothes the soul. So we're here to talk about Endwatch, which is part of a series. But what all have you written so far before we dive into that specific one?
Sorry, what was that?
So we're gonna talk about obviously the Endwatch book, which is part of the Silent series. But what all besides that have you written?
Oh, what are the other books have I written?
Yeah, other books, other series, however you want to classify it.
Yeah. So the first series I wrote was called Extinction New Zealand, and there's 4 books in that series. And if anyone's familiar with Nick Smith, it's set in his extinction cycle, where the Ebola virus is used to transmit a disease, like a genetically modified disease, and it turns people into these monsters called variants. And his series takes place in America, whereas mine obviously takes place in New Zealand. And then I have a second series called The Nameless, and that is set all over the show. Books 1 and 2 mainly take place in Japan. So there's some nice villains there, some Yakuza, and a lot of it takes place in the western seaboard of America, so California, Oregon, Washington State. I don't want to give away spoilers. And this new series is called The Silent Wars, and book 1 is Endwatch, and that it takes place in a dystopian future set 300 years from now, and the main place it is set is a big giant subterranean mine which is on the sea floor in the Pacific Ocean.
So are any of your post-apoc worlds linked, or is it just by genre?
No, they're not linked, but
some authors will write mini-series in the same universe, so I was just checking.
No, they're not linked. I like to create new worlds as much as possible.
All right. Well, because now we're going to move into talking about Endwatch and the series that it's part of, we're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man. And that's me this time. So, boom.
What will you do when the world goes belly up? Will you paint stripes on your cheeks, grab your flaming guitar, and enjoy the glorious post-apocalypse party? Or will you gnash your teeth and wail at the loss of civilization? Either way, we've a story for you. This post-apocalyptic collection has 15 great stories, each with its own spin on our future. Dive right into From the Ashes, a Bayonet Books anthology, before the future becomes now.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. And with that out of the way, so we're going to talk about the Endwatch in the series. So where did you come up with the idea for this one?
It came from a few places. The first place it came was I was hiking through a place called Krangaheki Gorge, not far from where I live in Hamilton. It's an old gold mining region, but it's very rugged, and they'd built all these mines that went under this huge mountain, like kilometers and kilometers of mines. And I saw like a information board, and I took a photo of it, and I thought, wow, it'd be cool to have a book set in a big mine. And then I forgot all about it, as you do, because you get plenty of ideas as an author and you write them down, but then you're off on doing other things. And I was writing a book, the fourth book in the Extinction New Zealand series, called The Sixth Law. And I was doing some research on genetic modification in engineering. And I came across this article about what was their name? Scientists called Doudna and Charpentier. And they were the ones that came up with the CRISPR-9 technique, which can be used to modify genes. And then that's where the idea sort of sprung from. And I went back and looked at some of my notes, and then I found the one about setting it in a mine, and that's how it all started. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good place to start as any. Do you find that you reuse some of that same research? Because you've got 10 books out now, all of them in various post-apocalyptic universes. Are there some commonalities that you find among the post-apocalyptic genre? Yeah,
like a lot of the military stuff. I save all the pages. I've got bookmarks all over the place, and then I do find myself going back and looking at things and reading things again, and getting and then like you write stuff down, and then I go back on my notes and I go, oh yeah, I could use that for this part, or I could use that for that book. So yeah, you do reuse a lot of it.
Given the research that you've done, do you think there's one place, if you had to be anywhere in the globe to write out a post-apocalyptic scenario, where would you want to be?
Like a country, you mean?
Anywhere, country, city. I mean, you could be as granular as you want to.
I would have to say the very bottom of the South Island here in New Zealand, or even Stewart Island, which is the next one down from the South Island. Just because you're far enough away from everything, that you could probably write it out quite easily, and that you could easily self-sustain and survive, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the places, like I definitely would not want to be in Hawaii because it is like it does not sustain without lots of shipments of goods and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the population has well outsourced the ability to sustain it on land. So if everything shuts down and EMP shuts everything down, lots of people there are going to be unalived at the end because you just can't support life to that degree.
Any heavily populated, like imagine being in something like Mumbai or New York City or something. It would be.
Yeah, I mean anywhere that's too populated, but at least with somewhere like New York City, if you get out soon enough, you have a chance to get away.
True.
I mean, unless you're one hell of a swimmer, if you're on Hawaii, you're just
yeah, you're sort of stuck out in the middle of nowhere in Hawaii, aren't you?
Yeah.
It'll be the same on any of those Pacific islands, you know. They rely so much on imports that, yeah.
Now, some of them would have sustained life at some degree before modernity hit. So I imagine you'd see some regression, but at least it wouldn't be instant death on some of them. Hawaii, though, there's just no way.
Surely the native Hawaiians would have a better chance if they're living, because they're more used to living that kind of older way, you know, of growing their own food and stuff.
If they know, sure, but a lot of them are being pushed off their land to build stuff.
Oh, really?
Like for tourists and stuff. And so it isn't so much about, I'm not making a value judgment about who would live and who wouldn't, because you just never know. Like that's somewhat of just bad luck, right place, wrong time kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's just the number of people on the island to what the island has the capacity to support from a growing perspective and a hunting perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, from a hunting, it can probably take a generation or two before that rebalances itself. So you're going to be stuck with what you can grow and what people already stocked.
Yeah. And what fish are left.
Yeah. And so, it's just, that's one of the places you don't want to be. All right. So we've got this post-apoc world. I'm going to throw the cover up. So what made you decide to go with this as the cover? Because like, you don't really see the character. You got his back profile. Clearly in some sort of tunnel, but he's got a dog with him. So points on the dog. So what made you go with this one?
Yeah, because I wanted to have the two main characters, which is Eli. Eli Mill is the main character, and his dog is called Knox with an X, N-O-X. And Knox is a genetically modified Alsatian. So basically a beefed up police dog.
Okay.
So he has super sense of smell, super eyesight. You know, he's aggressive when he needs to be. And I wanted to have like a sense of kind of like impending doom, which is why he's looking down the tunnel and he can see this light and he's sort of hesitating, going, okay, do I go down there? I need to go down there. I need to figure out what's going on. That's what I wanted to go for, kind of a sense of like what's going on.
So what can you tell us about the main character then?
The main character is what I call in the book, I call it a watcher. And that's sort of their version of a US Marshal, I suppose. He's like a cross between a US Marshal and a detective. His main job is to track down fugitives and bring them back to the main city to face justice. So if someone's escaped from prison or they've just run off from their bail, him and his team are sent into this labyrinth of tunnels that surround the city to track them down and bring them back.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say he's a bit of a music lover, old Eli. He's like even though it's set in the future, the city they live in have a lot of the old world data, like all the old albums and movies and TV shows. So he's a real music lover.
So given that a lot of post-apoc generally start like day one after the event, that seems to be a trend that you see. Is that something you did, or did you start many years after the event? Like, do we start with whatever the apocalyptic event is, or do we start further on? Like, where's the starting point of this story? Yeah,
it's set 300 years later. So there's been a big war, and it's called the Genetic War, and like a lot of people, like billions of people, have died because of this war. And this is set 300 years after that event, where society's kind of come back and everything's settled back down and ticking along again, except for poor old Eli and his friends.
So some post-apoc is like, almost caveman technology, and some of them it's a combination of that and modern. So where do you stand on the technological front in this world?
Okay, so I should start by saying that in Eli's world, humanity has been divided into three factions because of genetic modification. So you have the Thule, and they are heavily genetically modified, and they pretty much rule over the world. So they're sort of created in a lab, and they live pretty much. They're not immortal, but they can live for hundreds of years, and they're stronger, they're more intelligent, and they breed soldiers out of them, like super soldiers kind of thing. And then the second faction is called the Echoes, and they are, again, genetically modified, and they're sort of created for specific vocations. So if you need lumberjacks, they're like more muscly, they're more agile, they can climb up trees, all that kind of thing. And then the third faction is what Eli and his friends are, and they are colloquially called the Nats, which basically means natural born. And all natural born people in this universe are basically slaves. So you basically get told what to do. You get paid. So in that sense, it's not slavery, but you don't have any choice. This is what you do. This is where you live. And so he lives in a place called Lincoln, which is in a big subterranean mine on the seafloor of the Pacific. And yeah.
Okay. What made you decide to put the mine on the seafloor?
Something that hadn't been done before. Well, not done very often before, I should say. I have read a book where there was seafloor mining. I kind of wanted to exhibit that the technological advances that the Thule have made was that they were capable of mining the seafloor. I'm sure most people are aware that there's a lot of mineral wealth down there, but extracting it is, extremely difficult, and so they just don't bother. And so that's why I kind of wanted to set it somewhere a little bit different. And it was like to showcase that the ruling class, the Thule, are highly advanced technology. They have things like hover planes, they have fusion core engines, so they don't rely on fossil fuels. They have the ability to colonize Mars and the moon and asteroids and mine those. That's kind of why I wanted to set it there. It's just really to be a little bit different, not to and be ambiguous. I didn't want to set the book in like Denver or New Mexico or somewhere that's been done 100 times before. I wanted to be different. I wanted it to be a bit unique.
So given that they've got all this technology, would you consider it post-apoc or more dystopian? Because I'm getting very dystopian vibes. I guess they could overlap.
Yeah, they kind of, it's more dystopian than post-apoc. Because, yes, there was a big event that caused the near death of the world kind of thing, but, enough people survived and enough technology survived that they could just carry on, and they rebuilt society how they wanted. It was part of the reason it went to basically a World War III. It was because they wanted to create a society that they wanted. They didn't want to continue how things were. So yeah, it's definitely dystopian because there's a lot of technology in there that I completely made up, just out of pure fantasy.
So this sounds like it's the main characters obviously is Eli and Knox. Are there any secondary characters that are especially memorable?
Yeah, definitely. There's his partner. He has two partners that form the fugitive recovery team. There's Leilani Haru, and then there's Coulter Stone. And Leilani's like Eli, she's a Watcher recovery agent, a fugitive recovery agent, and Coulter Stone is like a computer tech genius guy who flies drones, and he's an absolute whiz with anything mechanical. So he drives them everywhere, and he fixes things when they need fixing. He flies drones. He uses drones to track people, things like that. Yeah.
And who are the bad guys in this? Without spoilers, obviously, what can you tell us about the
There's two main villains. The main villain is a guy called Simon, and he wears a kabuki mask. Yeah, kabuki mask. And so there's a bit of a mystery about who he is. And then there's a group called the Nine. And one of the main rules of being an act and living in the Lincoln City on the seafloor is you're not allowed to return to the surface. You know, you're down there mining till the day you die. And the Nine are this return to the surface cult. And Eli is sent into the labyrinth of tunnels to track down someone, and he comes across this return to the surface cult.
That almost sounds like they might be the good guys in this world.
Maybe they are. We'd have to read and find out.
Absolutely. So is this a man versus man at its heart story, or is it man versus environment?
Oh, it's definitely man versus man. Yeah, well, genetically modified man. So
do you think they've gotten so far away with their genetic modifications that they're no longer human?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that I touch on that quite a lot in the story. Yeah,
A transhumanism angle.
Yeah, more like, you're sort of playing around with creation, playing around. I don't know, like thinking you're a godlike figure, I suppose, creating things in the lab, and then it's like, how far away do you get from it? After hundreds of years of advances. So yeah, that is. I do talk about that a lot.
So you've got lab-grown peoples. Are there like cloning too, or is it just lab-grown embryos?
No, there is cloning. There's some later on in the series. There's some soldiers that are basically are clones. They're not are cloned off one person that they've created. So yeah, there is a little bit of cloning, but it's generally genetically modified. It's, for example, say you're a wealthy family and you want a child to be, an Olympic sprinter or something. And since you've got a lot of money, you can go and you can modify that child to how you want to be it. So that's how the Thule work. They work. It's like they create as they need. So they need a bunch of soldiers. They'll create a bunch of soldiers. But when they need the really bad soldiering done, like military stuff, where they're probably going to have a lot of casualties, they send in these clones where they're a bit more expendable.
Except for to the clones.
Yeah, exactly.
So are the clones like shorter lived than normally born, or are they as human as the next guy? Just
yeah, they're not. Yeah, trying to think of a way to say it without spoiling the story. They're not human as you and I would be, or even genetically modified. Like there's some physical characteristics that they have that aren't that human. They're not expected to live extremely long, more than 20 years. But it's not like Blade Runner where they have a half-life kind of situation.
So did you take any inspiration, since you're a Star Wars fan, from the Clone Wars stuff?
No, not really. No, I couldn't, because it's not. There's only really one set of clones. So, no, not really.
Okay. Given that you've put Eli and the natural-born humans through so much stuff as the creator of this universe, you meet him in a dark alley, you going to come out alive?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, yeah, like I said earlier, I love The Goonies. It's one of my favorite films. So there's a bit of a sense of adventure in there. It's not all doom and gloom. It's a very dark, gritty world that he lives in, but there's light at the end of the tunnel, like the cover shows. There's some hope there, and there's a good MacGuffin in there for everyone to see.
So, what would the age range for these stories be?
Ooh, you know what? I think even teenagers could read it. There's nothing. There's some cursing in there, but there's some made up curse words that they've come up with because you think it is 300 years later, so there's going to be some new inventions. There's a bit of horror, a bit of gore in there, but it's not that graphic. Yeah, there's nothing explicit in there. So I would say sort of mid-teens, 15 up.
So you mentioned that they are colonizing Mars and the asteroids and such. Do they leave the solar system? Is it like an FTL culture, or is it strictly soul-based?
Yeah, soul-based. Yeah, there's no FTL technology yet.
So is End Watch? It's obviously, it says it's book 1 in the series. So how long is this series going to be? The Silent War series?
At this stage, it's 3 books. That's what I have with Atheon, on a 3-book contract. Fingers crossed it extends to more. I would like to continue it because I feel there's more to the series, more to the story. But at this stage, it's 3 at the moment. Yeah.
So if this takes off, are you potentially going to explore other parts of this globe? Because obviously you focus this one, with New Zealand, it sounds like based characters, right?
No, because no, they're not New Zealand based. They it's like, so Lincoln, the city where they live in, is a real melting pot of cultures. There's American, New Zealand, Australia, Pacific, some South American influence, a little bit of Japan influence in there. So it's like it's hard to, I don't want to take any spoilers.
Okay.
Yeah, all I can say is it's a melting pot. So it's not, there is some New Zealand influences. I mean, I think it comes through naturally because of where I'm from, but it's not specifically that. And yes, in the next 2 books, we do explore other parts of the world.
Okay. And he was almost going to give us a spoiler, and the cops gave him the warning he's not allowed to do that. New Zealand law. He's apologizing now. So presumably, obviously, if you get more contract, you'll keep writing. Will the 3-book arc be satisfactory close of part of the story, even if the larger story keeps going?
Oh yeah. There's an end point, and the end of book 3 is the end point of that story arc.
So if you started book 4, would it be with the same main character, or would you switch POVs and go somewhere else in the world?
No, it's the same. I've already started writing it. It's the same. It's the same characters.
No. I'm saying if you get a contract to extend it to book 4.
Yeah, no, it's the same.
Okay.
I've already started working on it. Even though I haven't got a contract, I just starting with fingers crossed that it takes off and I get another contract. So.
Okay. So would this be another 3-book arc? Are you going to do like a trilogy of trilogies type deal, or are you just going to play it by year?
Probably play it by year. But yeah, I would like to do trilogy of trilogies would be pretty cool. So yeah, there's enough there. There's enough.
Once you finish the Silent Wars, would you want to play more in this universe with other series, or would you just go and build a new universe, you think?
I'd probably, I've got so many ideas. I would like to build another universe, definitely.
Okay. So if you could, obviously knowing what you know about the universe that is the Silent Wars, would you live there?
No way. I don't know if I'd survive it.
So you need a heck of a lot of plot armor.
Yeah. No, it depends where. If I could choose somewhere to live, you could survive. I mean, it's amazing what you're capable of doing when you have to. You know, when COVID happened, we all were like, "Ooh, what the hell's going on?" But we got through it, most of us.
So with some of the species that are born in a lab, essentially, do they have traditional family structures, or do you play with that some because, obviously they didn't, have the bond of a mother and a father that carried them through pregnancy, or however you do that? Like, do you play with how that might change familial structures for them?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. It's kind of like, trying to think of the best way to put it. More, I don't know if anyone's familiar with like Downton Abbey. There's a TV show called, yeah. And if you really watch that and how the family are with each other, it's very cagey, very kind of, there's no, they sort of live in all this big house together, but there doesn't seem to be much love and family connection. It's all very, you have to do this, you have to do that. Yeah, so it's more like that. It's more of a matriarchal or a patriarchal, depending on the situation. Yeah, like that. It's like they build these empires. The main ruling class, the Thule, their whole thing is building a legacy and an empire. So they breed a child specifically to do a certain task, or to perform a certain aspect of their business, and it's all, and then passing it on to them and passing it and so on. Kind of very sort of Japanese in a way. I don't know if people are familiar with Japanese culture, but they have they take a lot of emotion out of that family structure in that situation. I mean.
Okay. So is there anything about the Silent War series and Endwatch specifically that we didn't talk about? Because I know with a story like this, it's very difficult because, spoilers are a thing, and we intentionally don't want to do spoilers, right? So some of our lines of question just aren't an option for something like this. Is there anything that you want to tell us that I didn't ask before we wrap this up?
No, I can't really think of anything. I think we covered pretty much everything. It's really a story if people would love it if they like sort of mystery detective, but also set in a dystopian post-apocalyptic world where, I think it's quite a unique sort of universe. That's really what I was going for. But I wanted to have that sense of adventure and that sense of mystery that anyone that's watched all those 80s goodness movies would get a kick out of. But yeah, there is hope at the end of the tunnel, shall we say.
So obviously there's an audiobook because I'm showing the cover for it. Did your narrator hate you with some of the pronunciations you used? So
he never said anything to me, but I'm sure he did. In that book, and the first book, I purposely kept it as without anything too difficult. He's going to hate me when it comes to book 3 because there's a lot of local Kiwi slang words and strange pronunciations. So I expect him to email me with lots of cursing.
Well, we look forward to it then. He's going to prove his mettle this time, I guess. Just because the second book is out as the airing of this, I'm going to show you. Nope, it didn't record. Okay. I thought I had the second book cover saved, but if you click on the link, you'll be able to see it on the book link. Dear listener, we always link Tuesday. We always link to the book as it comes. Like the book we're talking about, we always link to that. So if you click that link in the show notes, you'll be able to see the second cover as well. So with that being said, how can listeners and viewers at home, if they want to check you out on the interwebs and find out more about you, how can they follow you?
The best way is to follow me on Facebook or Instagram. Are the two best ways. I post a lot of stuff, mainly on Facebook, not so much on Instagram. I do have a Facebook group called Guardians of the Apocalypse. If you search that, you'll find me. And then read through the rules of the group. And if you're interested in joining, just send me a request. I'm normally pretty prompt with that. I also have that website. That's a good way, or on Amazon. Another good way is on BookBub. I'm sure most of your listeners and viewers know about BookBub. That's another really good way of following me.
All right, and we'll link to all of that in the show notes, dear listener. You can find us on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com, for professional purposes only, people. We have our Facebook group and Facebook page, and more importantly, we have Madam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitters, and the emails. So send all the shenanigans her way. We link to our website, which is Spotify's a lot of gobbledygook, but our website is linked in the link tree, where you could support our show for as little as 99 cents a month. You can help keep the lights on, or you could support the show more directly over at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment sections for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till it pours out of their eyeballs. Speaking of the coffee brand coffee, links in the show notes, code podcast grunts, and you get 10% off. So what's not to love? And because I was remiss, I will remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book, so do your part, people. It really does make a difference, especially for a small press like Atheon, although I don't know if they qualify as small anymore. They're kind of growing. I mean, they just signed, Larry Correa and Richard Fox, so they're not the tiny outfit they used to be. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thank you for coming on, Adrian. We'll have to do this again. This was a lot of fun. Now I want to do a panel on post-apocalyptic topics, so we'll have to make that happen and get you on for that. It'll be fun.
Yeah, definitely. I'm keen. Anything.
All right, I'm going to add that to the list as I hit the end button. Boom.